Now to the Israel war with Hamas. Now, we in the media have done a terrible job this week in covering this conflict, and it has exposed the way that real disinformation can spread. And this is actually a perfect example of why you should not misuse the words mis or disinformation, because it waters down their meaning. If you use disinformation to suggest a political argument in which you disagree with is bad, what word do you use for a hospital bombing hoax? Because that is what happened this week, and with the help of wires and biased journalists on the ground, which pushed this supposedly verified news line out to newsrooms globally, it spread like wildfire.
Let's return to those live pictures coming into us from Gaza following reports of an Israeli airstrike on a hospital in central Gaza. These are pictures, we understand, of another hospital in Gaza where patients from that strike on another hospital are being brought to. The health ministry in Gaza is reporting that there have been 500 casualties in that Israeli airstrike. We don't have those figures verified, but they are reporting that 300 people have been killed. I just want to show you those still images as well that we've had in. And this is pictures that we've had which have been verified of this hospital, the Al-Ahli Hospital in the centre of the Gaza Strip, following that airstrike.
The fog of war is very real, and in a rolling news story like this, facts are hard to verify. But for the BBC to suggest that the photos of the bombed hospital were verified was a big mistake. We now know Hamas lied about the number of people killed, who fired the missile, and what was hit.
At the Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza City. According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened. They went as far as inflating the numbers of casualties. They understood with absolute certainty that it was a rocket misfired by Islamic Jihad that damaged the hospital. Analysis of our aerial footage confirms that there was no direct hit to the hospital itself. The only location damage is outside the hospital in the parking lot, where we can see signs of burning, which I will show later, no cratering, and no structural damage to nearby buildings.
A murderous group of terrorists who are holding 200 innocent people hostage surely wouldn't lie, would they? Now, no one should take anything that group says seriously, and we must be sceptical of any new claims they push. The ABC here in Australia was one of the first groups to push this discredited Hamas line, and even though Israel was strongly denying the allegations, it put this to air on October 18 on 7:30.
This is the turmoil after a strike overnight on a hospital in Gaza City, believed to have killed hundreds. Palestinians blamed an Israeli airstrike. Israel said a misfiring militant rocket was responsible.
And on the BBC in the UK, the same organisation which refuses to call Hamas a terror group, they ran this.
The Israeli military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes, because, when we've seen rockets being fired out of Gaza, we never see explosions of that scale.
Well, that report fell for disinformation because the hospital was never structurally damaged, the death toll is believed to be widely inflated, and the missile was fired by Islamic extremists, not by Israel. Now, the BBC, after being widely criticised for its reporting, eventually published an article today proving the hospital had not been bombed. They write, based on available evidence, it appears the explosion happened in a courtyard, which is part of the hospital's site. Images of the ground after the blast do not show significant damage to surrounding hospital buildings. What the images do show are scorch marks and burnt out cars. And at least the BBC sought to correct its misreporting on the matter, but no such admission from our ABC. Ironically, just last week, the ABC was complaining about misinformation on social media. Israel-Gaza misinformation is flooding social media. The European Union is demanding big tech walk the talk and fix it. And now that's all fine, but what about when our very own Australian journalists are the ones muddying the waters? What about when an organisation as large as the ABC refuses to admit any mistakes? It was the wrong call for us in the media to give that terror group's perspective such prominence. It should not be hard to admit this. And next time you hear one of these progressive journalists harping on about misinformation, remember this story. Remember the arrogance, the deceitfulness, and the way the issues seem to simply disappear the moment cracks appeared in their narrative. Now, Tim Blair, I want to go to you on this one because we were just talking about misinformation and the inappropriate way in which that label is used to shut down free speech. You have a situation here where a lot of people in the media, the overwhelming majority of people in the media, push this line, which is 100% false. I haven't heard much contrition.
No, none at all. And where there has been contrition, it's been covered, as you indicated, by, we've all got to do something to look at this. And really, big tech, they've got to really check that they're making certain all the facts are in line before they produce it. And it was big media that was producing all these errors. They claimed that 500 people had been killed in a hospital due to an Israeli attack. Well, apart from all of that being wrong, spot on, guys, you really got it right. It was actually potentially 10 to 15 people killed in a car park next to a hospital due to an attack from Hamas. And initially as well, we've got to indicate all the information about the 500 dead came from Hamas. When you read Palestinian health authorities, that's Hamas, the government in Gaza and the West Bank. As well, you've got, everyone watching this show has experienced covering or watching media coverage of disasters, and we always know how it goes. You get initial fears of a large death toll. You get the first 2 victims have been identified. You get fears of further casualties. You don't get straight away 500 as a believable situation. And everyone fell for it. Journalists who've actually covered these events for decades, they just went with the original big number, forgetting decades of experience and just throwing that aside and going, yeah, 500 sounds about right. Let's go with that. Cool.
Yeah, we should have been more sceptical of the figure. I think it's how you act, though, once we now know. Once the evidence has come out, Israel has released the audio, obviously. We've got the photos. It's beyond a doubt that we've all been misled. Isn't it how we act now and correct the record as well?
That's really, really important to correct the record. It was a really disturbing rush to judgment by the mainstream media, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 outlets. It was many major outlets around the world. And to treat the health ministry, the Hamas-run health ministry, as a legitimate source of news is just totally ridiculous. And the other thing about the whole story is that it was very illogical at that moment for Israel to do what they were saying it had done. No one has a bigger strategic stake in reducing civilian loss than the Jewish state. So at a moment when they were pausing their incursion into the Gaza Strip, why would they, send rockets? And they've always acted in a way to reduce civilian casualties in conflicts. And there's also a very well-documented history of the Palestinians and Hamas firing rockets from the Strip that fall short and end up killing Palestinians. And then they use those dead Palestinians as part of their propaganda war. But, unfortunately, Hamas know that they can blame Israel and find a very ready, gullible audience in mainstream media who will very, willingly believe the absolute worst about the Jewish state, unfortunately.
Well said. Darren, Tim, thank you so much for your help tonight.